What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 1 sleepers and studs. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to give you a sleeper pick and the top stud at each position. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, NFL Week 1, let's take a look at this 12-game main slate. At the quarterback position, the Week 1 stud at the quarterback position is Lamar Jackson from the Baltimore Ravens playing the Cleveland Browns, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson averaged 29.5 fantasy points per game on the season last year, getting an average of 11.7 rushes per game. He got 20 rushes in the last game that he played of the season, scoring 36 fantasy points. He's going to be about 12% owned, projected at 24.3 fantasy points here in Week 1. He's 8,100 DraftKings salary and 1,200 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 48 points scored in this game, and they have the Ravens favored by 7.5. So I like Lamar Jackson here versus the Cleveland Browns. Okay, my Week 1 sleeper pick at the quarterback position is Mitchell Trubisky from the Chicago Bears playing the Detroit Lions, who give up the third most fantasy points overall and the fifth most fantasy points to the quarterback position. Mitchell Trubisky averaged 14.7 fantasy points per game on the season last year. He's getting an average of 3.2 rush attempts per game. He's only going to be about 5% owned, projected at 15.2 fantasy points here in Week 1. He's 5,400 DraftKings salary and 1,500 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 42.5 points scored in this game, and they have the Bears favored by 3. So I like that this is a close, competitive game, and you're just hoping that Mitchell Trubisky, with another year under his belt, has improved at the quarterback position. He can scramble, he can get a rushing touchdown for you. So I like Mitchell Trubisky here versus the Detroit Lions. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. My Week 1 running back stud, no surprise here, it's Christian McCaffrey from the Carolina Panthers playing the Las Vegas Raiders, who had the 7th worst defense overall, and they were middle of the pack defending opposing running backs. Christian McCaffrey averaged 31 fantasy points per game on the season last year, getting an average of 8.8 targets per game and 17.9 rush attempts per game. He's going to be about 23% owned. He was on the field for 93% of the snaps last year and was touching the ball 41% of the time. He's projected at 23.1 fantasy points here in Week 1. He's 10,000 DraftKings salary and the same price on FanDuel. He scored 23, 35, and 38 fantasy points in the last 3 games of the year last season. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 47.5 points scored in this game, with the Panthers favored by 3. So it's a high-scoring game, a competitive game. So I like Christian McCaffrey here versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Okay, my Week 1 running back sleeper pick is David Montgomery from the Chicago Bears playing the Detroit Lions, who have the 3rd worst defense overall, and they gave up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. David Montgomery averaged 11.2 fantasy points per game on the season last year, getting an average of 2.2 pass targets and 15.1 rush attempts. He's only going to be about 1% owned. But take a look at the last game of the season. He got 23 rush attempts, scored 20 fantasy points. Now he's only projected at 10.4 fantasy points here in Week 1, but I think he's going to do much better than that projection. He's $5,900 DraftKings salary and the same price on FanDuel. So we know Vegas thinks there's going to be 42.5 points scored in this game, with the Bears favored by 3. So I like David Montgomery here versus the Detroit Lions. Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL, MLB is still going, NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups. Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. The Week 1 wide receiver stud is Michael Thomas from the New Orleans Saints playing the Tampa Bay Bucks, who have the 9th worst defense overall, and they give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. So just a smash spot for Michael Thomas here in Week 1. He scored an average of 25.3 fantasy points per game on the season last year, getting an average of 11.6 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 15% owned, projected at 20.4 fantasy points here in Week 1. He's $9,000 DraftKings salary and $200 less on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 48 points scored in this game, and they have the Saints favored by 3.5. So a high-scoring game, and they've got Tom Brady on the other side of the ball there, so it's going to be a competitive game and a fantastic matchup. So I like Michael Thomas here versus the Tampa Bay Bucks. Okay, my Week 1 sleeper pick at the wide receiver position is Hunter Renfrow from the Las Vegas Raiders playing the Carolina Panthers, who had the 6th worst defense overall, and they were middle of the pack defending opposing wide receivers. Hunter Renfrow averaged 10.7 fantasy points per game on the season last year, getting an average of 5.5 pass targets per game. He's only going to be about 2% owned, but take a look at his last 2 games of the season. He scored 25 and 27 fantasy points off of 9 pass targets in each of those games. He's projected at 9.9 fantasy points here in Week 1. He's only $4,500 DraftKings salary and $700 more on FanDuel. So we know Vegas thinks there's going to be 47.5 points scored in this game, with the Raiders favored by 3. So a high-scoring game, competitive game. So I like Hunter Renfrow here versus the Carolina Panthers. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. The Week 1 tight end stud is George Kittle from the San Francisco 49ers playing the Arizona Cardinals, who had the 2nd worst defense overall, and they gave up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing tight ends last year. So a smash spot for George Kittle, who scored an average of 16.5 fantasy points per game on the season last year, getting an average of 7.6 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 12% owned. He was on the field for 75% of the snaps last year, and he's projected at 17 fantasy points here in Week 1. He's $7,200 DraftKings salary and $800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 48 points scored in this game, with the San Francisco 49ers favored by 6.5. So I like George Kittle here versus the Arizona Cardinals. Okay, my Week 1 tight end sleeper pick is Jack Doyle from the Indianapolis Colts playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, who gave up the 10th most fantasy points overall last year, and they were middle of the pack defending opposing tight ends. Jack Doyle was averaging 7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 4.5 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 11% owned, and he was on the field for 74% of the snaps last year. He's projected at 8.9 fantasy points here in week 1. He's only $3,600 DraftKings salary and $1,700 more on FanDuel. So I like that DraftKings price. Vegas thinks there's going to be 45 points scored in this game, and they have the Indianapolis Colts favored by 8. So I like Jack Doyle here versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. And you know what, guys? Next week, I'm not going to give you the top salary for my stud pick at each position. I did that this week, but I won't do that in week 2. If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video.